Egypt and the reactions towards the statement of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz, towards the situation in Egypt. Today our topic is about the most or the hottest issue that dominates the Arabian arena nowadays, which is the current situation in Egypt that has sparked mixed reactions worldwide. Egypt has entered a new phase after security forces broke up the sit-ins from two sprawling encampments, Rab'a al-Adawiyya Square in central Cairo and Al-Nahda Square in Giza, where they had been camped out for 6 weeks, demanding the deposed President Mohamed Morsi's reinstatement. The military-imposed month-long state of emergency and nighttime curfew in order to restore the security and stability across the country. The situation forced the United Nations Security Council to hold urgent meeting to discuss the latest developments in Egypt. For their parts, EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton and US Secretary of State John Kerry issued joint statement over the latest situation in Egypt. In the spirit of supporting Egypt, democratic transition, Deputy Secretary of State Bill Burns and Special Representative for the Southern Mediterranean Bernardino Leon have been working together intensively over the past week to urge the government and opposition parties to begin a process of genuine reconciliation and move ahead inclusively to consider amendments to the Constitution and prepare as quickly as possible for parliamentary and presidential elections. Meanwhile, the kingdom stand strongly by Egypt and played a great role to pressurize the Western countries not to take any action against Egypt, as what happened in the country was internal affairs and that anyone tried to interfere would help in igniting sedition. The matter that the kingdom will not accept. That was very clear by the statement issued by the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz Al Saud, who stated the kingdom situation very decisively and clear in supporting the Egyptian people and the Egyptian military by all means to help the country pass this hard transitional period. Also, His Royal Highness Prince Saud Al Faisal, in a statement to the kingdom's news agency SPA, that the kingdom expresses hope that all political forces in Egypt would take part in and contribute to these efforts in a way to guarantee and enhance the national unity and coherence of the Egyptian people. His Royal Highness Prince Saud Al Faisal said that the kingdom expected the world community to support the Egyptian government to achieve the security and avoid the crippled measures that stand in front of achieving the stability in the country. Prince Saud Al Faisal comments came after the United States pointed out that it might cut off aid and ahead of the United Nations, or rather the EU meeting today to discuss possible responsible to violence in Egypt. Let's take a look at this report from Egypt about the latest enlightenment, and we'll come back for further discussions.
Egypt is facing one of its cruelest weeks in its history. At least 1,411 have been killed since the deposing of President Mohamed Morsi last month. Among the killed are soldiers and security forces on raid attacks by terrorists in different areas in Egypt, including Sinai and Aswan. Not only that, but terrorism has caught mosques and churches in a scene witnessed for the first time in Egypt. In reaction to the escalating violence, Egyptian president had declared a state of emergency and set a curfew which has been imposed on 12 out of 27 governorates, including Cairo, Giza, Alexandria, Suez, Ismailia, Asyut, South and North Sinai. It will last for a month, and those who do not abide by the curfew will be imprisoned, according to the cabinet statements. On Tuesday, Egyptian authorities have arrested the Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Badi', near Rab'a al-Adawiyya Square, as well as other senior Brotherhood members who are wanted by the authorities for inciting violence and committing crimes as well as mass killings, but their names are yet to be revealed to the public. On the other hand, Egypt's public prosecution has charged deposed President Mohamed Morsi of contributing in the killing and aiding of protesters in front of the presidential palace last year, detaining him for a further 15 days.
لا شك أن الأحداث السياسية التي تحدث في مصر.
There is no doubt that the situation in Egypt is critical and that the scene of violence are escalating when the truth is not clearly seen to many people, especially those who are still with the legacy of Morsi's regime. They have a certain ideologies and objection towards the roadmap, which is not making the situation get any better. It's important now to leave all differences aside and have bloodshed in Egypt, abide the curfew until we pass through this stage, and start a fresh era with new election and constitution.
نؤكد على دعمنا لجهود الحكومة.
We support the government and the army and all efforts it extracts to combat terrorism in the country. The Egyptians, after the 30th June revolution, must defend their country against extremists and demonstrate all forms of violence.
We will never let anyone to interfere our internal matter. We will face anyone who try to destroy our army or destroy our security organization.
In reaction to the crisis in Egypt, Presidential Advisor for Strategic and Political Affairs Mustafa Higazi asserted that Egypt is a powerful state and capable of making its own decisions, assuring that the country is moving forward with implementing the designated roadmap and restoring security and stability in the country. While both the US and European Union have criticized the situation in Egypt and threatening to cut their aid and support to Egypt, a strong show of support for Egypt came from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz Al Saud, announced the kingdom's support to Egypt in its fight against terrorism. King Abdullah said Egypt's stability is being targeted by haters, warning that anyone interfering in Egypt's internal affairs is igniting sedition. In addition, His Royal Highness Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal accused countries that slammed Egypt's steps against terrorism of believing propaganda and assuming hostile positions towards the interests and the stability of the Arab and Islamic nations. In the meantime, the military airport east of Cairo had welcomed on Tuesday 8 planes from Saudi Arabia bringing aid to Egypt, as per the orders of the King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz, for at least so far 100 tons of medical aid necessary to set up 3 field hospitals and some other facilities needed by the security forces. The airlifted aid is scheduled to continue to arrive during the upcoming days via the military airport in a number of 47 jet flights. A medical team has arrived there before the airlift to determine the necessary medical needs of the field hospitals. Also, the setup of 3 field hospitals in support of the Egyptian people will have available mobile operation rooms.
ما يقوم به سيدي خادم الحرمين الشريفين يحفظ الله.
The stance of the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz, toward Egypt is a stand of responsibility and duty, as we are sure Egypt will pass through this critical phase and regain a leading position in the region. The Saudi support is maintaining stability in Egypt is huge support and plays an important role for Egypt to pass through this critical phase. And I see that this next few days there will be a new equation in the region and means of facing terrorism and violence.
As part of implementing the roadmap, the committee of experts in charge of amending the constitution announced that it had studied all the recommendations made by citizens and state institutions. The Constitutional Committee have concluded, and a new committee for finalizing the constitution will be chosen within few days.
The positions of the Arab and Western nations towards what is happening in Egypt is varying. The international community, particularly the United States and the European Union, still want legitimacy back in the country and are calling what is happening in Egypt a coup, while the Arab states, particularly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is supporting Egypt in fighting terrorism and all forms of violence. What is going to happen in this country within the next few days, particularly after the capture of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders? When will the roadmap be designated, and what will happen to the constitutional amendments are few questions that are still waiting answers by the cabinet. For Political Agenda, this is Yasmin Bakir reporting from Cairo, Egypt.
Welcome back to Political Agenda. Thank you, Yasmin Bakir, for this report. Allow me to introduce my panelists. From Riyadh, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Dr. Abdelaziz Aluwaisheg, Assistant Secretary General for the Gulf Cooperation Council for International Negotiations. From Kuwait, Dr. Adil Manna, an academic and advisor to the Kuwaiti Journalist Association. Last but not the least, Dr. Professor Jamal Abdel Jawad, Professor of Political Science at AUC and former Director of Al-Ahram Institute of Political and Strategic Studies. Thank you all for joining me, and allow me to start the program from Cairo with Dr. Jamal Abdel Jawad. Dr. Jamal, first of all, how do you read as a political professor, and how did the Egyptian people receive the statement of the custodian of the two holy mosques regarding what is, or the situation in the Arab Republic of Egypt, and asking the international community not to interfere to ignite sedition in the Arab Republic of Egypt? And he also asked the wise Egyptians and the Arab thinkers and the intellectuals to stand along with the Arab Republic of Egypt. That was described by Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the defense minister, as the biggest support for Egypt since 1973 by King Abdullah. How do you read it, and how is it received in Egypt?
First, I should say that it was received by a great deal of satisfaction, happiness, and gratitude, actually. This is really very instrumental and constructive statement made by His Majesty the Custodian of the Two Holy Places, King Abdullah. This is a time, this is a serious time in Egypt. Not only that, it's a serious time in the Middle East. What happening is in Egypt is a Middle Eastern affair. It is something that is interest all nations in the region, particularly major actors, and Saudi Arabia is in front of those major actors in the region. There was a necessity and to show and to demonstrate particularly to Western nations, that Egypt is not standing alone, that Egypt cannot be singled out and pressured by European nations and states and few others here and there. So yeah, there is Egypt in a situation where it feels vulnerable because of the current developments in the country. So for Saudi Arabia to step forward and to show support for Egypt, I think this was very instrumental in making the Western countries to reconsider their earlier position. And I wouldn't understand the statement or the decisions made by the foreign ministers of the European Union today without taking into consideration the visit that was made by Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal to Paris. This was particularly important because France is a major actor in Europe. The French government was on somewhat a path of escalation against Egypt, and I think I'm sure that the Saudi message that was delivered to them made them consider their position, and with the kind of mild reaction that we heard today from the foreign ministers of Europe is very much related to that. Saudi Arabia is aware again that Egypt is even though it is vulnerable and these days, but it is the future of the Middle East could be decided here in Egypt. It's a very important nation, central nation, even though regardless of those vulnerabilities today, and it is a battle. The fight now taking place in Egypt is not only an internal struggle or conflict. It is it's about two visions for the Middle East and for the Arab world. On the one hand, there is this supranational vision of the Arab world and for the Muslim world that look down to the nation state, to the territorial modern nation state, and consider it that something that is relevant or created by colonial maneuvers, etc. And the only way is to the only right thing is to unite and the entire nation by the destruction, through the destruction of the nation state in the region. A kind of a revisionist view that actually would undermine stability and would undermine states in the region. We have experienced similar views in the past, and we got nothing out of them except instability, destruction, and conflict between Arab and Muslim nations. So for Saudi Arabia now to come to step forward and to defend the position of the Egyptian government, it is defending the other view, the view of looking at the Middle East and the Arab world as a regional system. Its building blocks are the nation states. We seek cooperation between those states. We seek solidarity between those states, but we are not seeking the destruction of those states as those supranational pan-Islamist visions are seeking and supporting. So it's in the defense of the stability and the prosperity of the entire Arab world and the Muslim world. This is the policy of Saudi Arabia, and really it should be appreciated and we should be grateful for that.
Well said, sir. Dr. Abdelaziz Aluwaisheg, before I go to Kuwait with Dr. Minna, as a diplomat, sir, and as a negotiator, international negotiator, first of all, as the GCC bloc or the Arab countries, how did you receive the statement or the speech of the custodian of the two holy mosques? Secondly, the trip or the continuous trips of Prince Saud Al Faisal, it reminds us of the 1990 during the Kuwaiti occupation by the Saddam Hussein forces. He was living in an airplane, traveling around the world. First of all, how do you see the speech of the custodian of the two holy mosques in getting all the Arabs in understanding the situation as described by Dr. Jamal? Because in Europe and the Western countries are kind of double standard and they have double vision. When we look at the Syrian situation and the Egypt, they did not, with the 100,000 killed in Syria, no intervention, and with the rights of the people in Egypt to change, we find all the governments of the world are standing against, and some of them are considered as a coup. The speech of the custodian of the two holy mosques came at the right time, and I want to repeat that as considered by the defense minister of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, as the biggest support that Egypt has witnessed since 1973. How do you read it, sir?
Well,
how do you read the situation of Saudi Arabia?
Obviously, I think everybody recognizes the statement by the custodian of the two holy mosques as an important watershed in the discussion about Egypt, even those, whether they agree with it or have issues with some of what it contains. It's clear from the statement, brief as it is, there are 4 principles that the king emphasized. I mean, he started by expressing pain about what was happening in Syria and in Egypt, and that the need to stand with Egypt. And he expressed that in these 4 principles. And one of them, the need to stop the bloodshed, the need to preserve stability of Egypt. And the third one is to respect the will of the Egyptian people. And 4, to stop interfering or to not to interfere in the Egyptian internal affairs. It seems with that the king was not taking issue about intra-Egyptian discussions, because that's not the place of Saudi Arabia or outside powers, to leave these issues to the discussions between Egyptians, but to at the same time emphasize Saudi Arabia's concern about the need that Egypt be stable, Egypt be free of violence and terrorism, that it will not be a source for terrorism that could destabilize Saudi Arabia or its neighbors. And the third, that we should respect the will of the Egyptian people. Prince Saud elaborated on that in several statements. The statement he made in France talked about the need to give Egypt's roadmap
A chance for the roadmap to succeed.
And if you go back to the roadmap, it was announced in July by General Sisi.
Yes.
It's really a 10-point program. Again, people may agree or disagree on its particular points, but it is the belief of Saudi Arabia was that to give it a chance, and it calls for early elections. It calls for the turning over control temporarily to the judicial authority in the person of Adli Mansour, who is the chief judge of Egypt, and tasking the High Constitutional Court with the task of drawing a new constitution, because as you recall, it was amending the constitution that started the infighting
and
in Egypt between
declaration, which was in November 20.
The constitutional declaration, also the constitution in itself. There's many Egyptians who were part of the Constituent Assembly that was charged with putting together the constitution, withdrew. So it's obvious there was some polarization in Egypt, and the need to have some independent authority like the High Judicial Court arbitrate these differences. Again, I think the point that you should give this roadmap a chance, because it will be clear from the implementation of this 10-point roadmap how serious the Egyptian government about restoring civilian control over the government, which is everybody believes in. Prince Saud al-Faisal pointed out to early elections, which were the demands, as he put it, of 30 million Egyptians, and that should be respected. And that was part of the roadmap by charging the Constitutional Court to make amendments to the election law to make it possible to have early elections. One of the points in the roadmap was to again revisit those controversial parts of the Constitution, to include the people and the points that were excluded under the Brotherhood brief control of the government.
Okay, let me go to Kuwait with Dr. Aidel Manna. Dr. Aidel Manna, with your experience, sir, first of all, let's take a look at the efforts of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, along with the efforts also of the Kuwaiti government, also have supported the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So several Arab countries have supported the Egyptian now controlling, or the government that is controlling or dominating the political scene, as said literally by Prince Saud al-Faisal. First of all, how do you read the support of the kingdom and some of the GCC countries with our brothers in Egypt?
Thank you very much, and thank you for your guest also.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, actually, the support of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and especially the statement made by His Majesty King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz, definitely reflects his prudent vision and understanding about what was happening in Egypt. And that's to avoid Egypt of going through a civil war. We have to side at the moment with the new interim government to protect Egypt from going through this kind of civil war. Whether we do agree or not with what happened to the government of the deposed President Mohammed Morsi, this is not our affair. This is the Egyptian affairs, who are their own internal affairs. King Abdullah bin Abdelaziz made it very clear that there is nobody has the right to intervene in the internal affairs of Egypt.
Yes.
And this is for the Egyptian to decide for their own destiny.
Yes.
And that's as long as this government, interim government, it is not a permanent government, and that's this government preparing for a new constitution and a new election for the parliamentary system and for presidents. And this government will be for a period of time, and we have to give it the time to come back to the Egyptian and call them to choose their own representative. And that's unfortunately, it had not been understood by the Western nations, and especially by the United States of America. They measure their own, they measure their criteria on our cases. And I think this is very big mistakes. They thought that because Morsi was elected as a president, he has the right to do what he likes to do. I think they have to understand what happened during 1 year. Unemployment is very high. The people are suffering from a lot of problems, whether with energy or with the social unrest. And that's millions of Egyptians, probably 30 million as is being claimed by the opposition, took the street against Mr. President, Mr. Morsi himself and his government. And these people are actually proving that the Egyptian no longer want President Morsi to be in power, and the others come to the army, other political parties, and also the religious clergymen for Al-Azhar and the church. They all actually consulted the army chief or the defense minister, General Sisi, and they all decided to actually take a new approach, and that's the president has to step down either by his choice or by the force, because they proposed to him that he must call for an area election. But unfortunately, he did not listen to them. And that's the army himself found itself either to let the conflict between the people who supporting the president and those who oppose them, or to take a step to replace the president by a new interim government. And that's what happened. The Gulf states, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, decided to side with the Egyptian people, with the will of the nation, not with this person or that, or in internal affairs. We really want Egypt stability and security to be secured, and that will not be if we let those who actually camped in Rab al-Adawiyya and the Nahda and other places to continue their unrest. And that's actually what we want: Egypt secure and stable, and going on to implement what the Egyptian people want.
You're right. We have, the viewers, we have many times, Egypt, the Arab Republic of Egypt, have stood with all the Arab issues and the Arab stands, from the Palestinian issue until the Kuwaiti liberation and all the issues of the Arabs. Egypt have stood with all Arabs, and now it's our turn as Arabs to stand with the Arab Republic of Egypt. After the short pause, we'll discuss the international situation, the US situation, Catherine Ashton and her visit to the Arab Republic of Egypt. Short pause and we'll come back. Welcome back. We're still discussing the situation in the Arab Republic of Egypt that does not make us feel, or makes us feel very sad for our biggest tent to have the violence, as said by Dr. Abdelaziz Aluwaisheg. But let me go to Dr. Jamal. Dr. Jamal, first of all, as a politician and as the former director of Al-Ahram Strategic Studies Center. How do you read the situation, or how do you read the Americans' reactions? We have seen many visits by the Americans, some of the Congress members, McCain and some of his colleagues, also Burns visited, and Catherine Ashton. But I want you to kind of enlighten me with the American situation and where do they stand so far?
Well, there is a number of dimensions here. On the one hand, the United States have a kind of an old partner in Egypt. This is the Egyptian military. The Egyptian military, the American military Egyptian military relations is quite old. It goes back to 30 years ago since the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel was established.
Camp David, yes.
And so the United States was cooperating with Egypt in a number of ways, but a kind of a partnership was developing with the Egyptian military. In the past few years, the United States began to develop some sort of other partnership with the Muslim Brothers, particularly when after the revolution of 2011. So the situation that the United States is dealing with now is a kind of a power struggle between two sides, the military on the one hand and the Muslim Brothers on the other hand, and they try to strike a balance here, hoping that they can maintain this kind of relationship. But I think it is they are mistaken here, because the Egyptian military is not just the Egyptian military. It's not the same institution that they've been dealing with for 30 years. It is rather taking a leading role in representing a broad national coalition in Egypt that has expressed dismay with the former President Mohammed Morsi, and also with the entire organization of the Muslim Brothers. So it's not the same technical way, or the same military that used to cooperate with the Americans on technical security issues, etc. So trying to maintain this balance and maintain this relationship with the two partners is not going to work. It's really the power struggle in the country between the two major blocs now, the nationalists on the one hand and the Islamists on the other, looks like irreconcilable for the time being at least, and the Americans will keep making mistakes if they fail to be clear and take sides on this. The other issue, the other dimension is the kind of standards that the Americans are applying in Egypt. They apply some sort of standards that have been developed in different contexts, and in a very artificial way try to apply it in the situation in Egypt. Things have different meanings when they move from one country, one culture, one political context to another context. It is so the American and the Western political experience is very much appreciated, and definitely it is very well developed. But on the other hand, our societies have different kinds of problems, they have different kinds of challenges. And this is something that the Americans fail to address, actually. So the situation now, the American policy now, on the one hand, failing to develop the right criteria and the right standards, and trying to satisfy different interests and different demands. On the one hand, you have their new partners in the Muslim Brothers, and you have the old partnership with the Egyptian state and with the Egyptian military. They also have different demands from the constituencies there in America. You have those who think that the United States should maintain its national security interests, etc., in the Middle East, regardless of the internal conflict in Egypt. And there are those who adhere to, in a very artificial way, to certain principles we all respect and we all seek. The implementation in our country's principle of democracy and human rights, but at the same time you cannot just turn a switch and you can apply them in other countries. So what we see now is a kind of a very indecisive policy, very hesitant policy. There is a lot of contradictions. Sometimes they make statements that show support for the Muslim Brothers, in a following statement they go the other direction. And actually, this is, I would say, there is a lack of policy on the side of the United States.
The foreign policy.
Interestingly, you look at the Egyptian public opinion, you find people in both sides of the divide in Egypt are not